right.
We're taking all the best old school wisdom and blending it with the top new school methods to bring you the optimal coaching strategies. This is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast with Coach Bo.
Welcome, youth baseball coaches. Great to be here with all of you. Our weekly get-together where we improve and fine-tune our coaching game. Obviously, the podcast is the 80-20 Baseball Podcast, the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass, where we are working hard, trying our best to master the key parts of coaching baseball, coaching youth baseball, and then working from there. We want to master the big needle movers first and move from there. And the 80-20 principle, the 80-20 rule, I'm sure most of you are familiar, heard it, are familiar with it in some way or another. I'm such a huge fan of the 80-20 principle that I use it in all areas of my life, from parenting to exercise to my diet, to how I take care of my yard. And the 80-20 principle, and this may be a different way of looking at it, is a quantitative way to prioritize. Our whole life, we've heard of prioritizing, making sure we have our priorities in order. You need to have a list of priorities. There are some huge flaws with simply having a list of priorities. Now, if you take a list of priorities, say 1 through 15 of the things you want to coach up with your team, your kid, your players. If you make a list 1 through 15, the list is not separating accurately the value that each item on the list inherently has or will produce or will yield out there on the field with your players, with your team. In other words, if we have a list of 1 through 15 of our priorities, how do we know how much more of a priority number 2 is than number 3? We think it's one number better, right? How much more of a priority is number 8 on that list from number 9? Well, on the list, it's one number better. And some of you can see where I'm going with this already. One number better is not an accurate way to quantify the value or the impact each thing on the list has when compared to other things on the list. For example, the thing right below it. Is it one number better? If we have a list of 15 items that we want to coach up this season, by using a numbered list 1 through 15, we fail to divvy out an accurate value, an accurate amount of value to each thing on the list. For example, hitting and pitching are substantially more important than the third thing on the list. Hitting and pitching happen every pitch. That's why they're more important than anything else. And it's not like they're one number better. You could put hitting as number 1 or pitching as number 1. You could flip them back and forth, 1A, 1B. But after that, third thing on the list is going to be way below those two because those two things happen every pitch. So in terms of quantity, they happen on every pitch. Now, the hitter isn't always swinging, of course, on every pitch, but they're in the box, at least with the hitting plan, a hitting approach, for every pitch. The pitcher is throwing a pitch every pitch, of course. Those happen substantially more than the third item on that list. We're using the 80-20 principle, the 80-20 rule, to guide us toward allocating our practice time, our training time more accurately. Not just saying these are the big needle movers, but saying these are the biggest needle movers, these are the next biggest. How often do things happen in a typical game over the course of a season? And one simple example that I think is overlooked by coaches at all levels is hitting ground balls equally amongst your infielders in a ground ball drill. First base fields one ground ball for every 5 to 6 throws they catch from an infielder, shortstop, third base, second base, pitcher, catcher, throwing it over to them to complete the out at first base. First basemen field far fewer ground balls than shortstop and second base. So hitting an equal amount of ground balls to first base as you would your shortstop and second base takes away from those positions, shortstop, second, even third, that need more reps in practice because they will get more reps in the game. There's some variation to this, of course. If you have a player that's really great at shortstop and a first baseman that can't field anything, you might shift some of those reps over to the first baseman because of the large liability they might be on defense. But by and large, we need to look at a game and then reverse engineer it to allocate our practice and training time accordingly. I've often seen practices that have a 40-minute batting practice, a 45-minute batting practice, and 25 to 30 minutes of relays, throwing relay drills. And a throwing relay happens 5 times a game. If your pitcher's doing well, less than that. If your pitcher's not, more than that. But let's say in a 6 or 7 inning game, it's about 5 times. There might be a relay throw from the outfield. Some games it's just a few. Some games it's a lot more. But our teams are going to have 25, 35, 40 at-bats in a game. So as we go out there and coach up our players, it's always important that we use the compass. Our compass should be what happens and how often things happen in a game and what impact the actions, the plays, the skills in the game have on the outcome. This is outside of team culture building. This is simply within the context of skill development and game prep, things like that. So we use what happens in a game, how often it happens in a game, the impact it has on the game. We take all those things, we look at how often they happen, we quantify it, or at least estimate, and then we allocate our training time accordingly. And what we find is about 20% of the things that happen in the game account for 80% to 90% of our team's success. Two things account for 50% or more of the success, hitting and pitching. And at the youth level, you could say catching is up there. So a list of priorities doesn't do justice in terms of accuracy on the value, the impact that each item on the list is going to have. It'd be better to do a pie chart instead of a priority list, a priority pie chart. Another way to more accurately prioritize using the 80-20 principle would be, for example, let's say, you had 10 items you really wanted to coach and really emphasize this season. We know hitting and pitching are going to be at the top and they have huge value, huge impact. So we could say hitting and pitching number 1, 2, 3, and 4, and 5. Those could be the first 5. In other words, we take the list and we don't just give pitching and hitting the one spot, the number 1 slot. We give it the number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5 slot. And then we put, say, catching, then ground balls, fly balls, playing catch, working down, base running, etc. I list out the priorities on the drill design guide that's for free over at 80-20 Baseball if you want to see that list. But again, that list is going to have them in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. Really, the list should be hitting and pitching should be 1, 2, 3, 4, catching should be 5 and 6, and I kind of think back to when I played high school football, we had these things called periods. They were 5-minute blocks. We had about 35 periods every practice. And the more important items would take up like 10 periods or 8 periods or 12 periods. The things of lesser importance would take up 1 or 2 periods. So definitely don't allocate your practice time equally across all things. Go heavy on the big needle movers. Go heavy on that 20%, that 10% that are going to drive 80, 90% of your results, your team's results. So I think at the end of the day, in everything we do in our life, a better way of listing our priorities is a pie chart. And a pie chart's great because the clocks typically are circles. A pie chart is a circle, of course, and we can see how much of that clock, how much of our practice time, our training time, each item should take up. Just some food for thought there. All right, so speaking of being in the middle of the season for most of us, I'd love to hear from all of you. Some of you may be nearing the end of your season. Others might be getting revved up or prepping for some summer ball action. If you have any baseball-related questions, please send them my way. I'd be more than happy to address them on the podcast, as it's likely that if you have a particular question, other coaches probably have the same one or a similar one. You can reach me by emailing Coach Bo at 8020baseball.com or go over to the website, use the contact page, and I look forward to hearing from you and addressing your questions on the show. So don't hesitate, reach out. So last week I mentioned I was going to share out 3 goals that are really great to have, 3 really good goals to have for every youth coach. I'll dive into those right now, and then I'll get into what the coach that I worked with, Coach Scott, did amazing. The 8 things that really stood out and impressed me in a season that just finished up. Some youth soccer. My kid was playing on the team, and I want to share with you 8 specific things Coach Scott did that really impressed me that we can all take and learn from. And hopefully we're already doing some of these, and there may likely be some on here that might give you some good ideas to go out there and run with. And we'll finish up the episode with my thoughts on my tour of Driveline Baseball. I toured their new facility. I'll talk about that. 3 goals that we should all consider having as youth coaches. Number 1, every player improves from the start of the season to the end of the season. More specifically, did every player objectively improve from the start of the season to the end of the season at XYZ skill or facet of the game? For example, throwing more accurately. Did every player throw more accurately at the end of the season than they did at the beginning? You could simply test this with an accuracy test. You could do an accuracy test at the beginning of the season. If you got a racquetball court, tape up a little target, or just order a cheap target that can overhang, that can overlay on a screen, a net, a fence, or just have them throw to their partner and score each throw according to how close it was to their partner's chest or middle of their body. It's a 3, 2-1-0. A 3, boom, right inside the body, inside that frame. Below the waist, down to the knees, could be a 2. Above the shoulders, but reachable, could be a 2. Arms extended out past the body, but reachable without stretching, that could be a 2. Then if the player needs to stretch or jump, that's a 1, or has to go down to the ground all the way and catch it off the grass, that's a 1, or has to stretch to the left or right, that could be scored a 1. And a 0 would be if they just completely missed their partner. That's a simple way to do it. You just have them throw 10, have them throw 15, add the score, and that could be your baseline. Just an example. You could do it a lot of different ways. So a really good goal to have is, did every player improve from the start of the season to the end of the season? Did they objectively improve from the start of the season to the end of the season I would choose 2 to 3 skills. I think 3 skills is probably good, or one facet on defense. Did they field ground balls more effectively? Did they catch fly balls more consistently? You could do hitting. Did they swing at better pitches by the end of the season than they did at the beginning? Did they strike out less? Were they making better contact at the end of the season than they were at the beginning? Were they throwing more strikes pitching-wise? Was their strike percentage better at the end of the season than at the beginning? Did they make better swing decisions? Did they know where to go with the ball better by the end of the season? Did they know where to go when the balls hit to them? Were they more prepared? Were they anticipating the game better by the end of the season? So maybe pick a few skills that you think are very important for your team at your level, and that's one of your goals. Did they improve X, Y, and Z skills by the end of the season? Was it better for them than at the start? And the nice thing about this is each player, it's going to be assessed based off of their starting point, not the best player on the team starting point or the worst player. Maybe the player with the least ability hitting wise is still the player with the least ability hitting wise at the end of the season, but it's better than the hitting ability, or they had more hitting success at the end of the season than that specific player they did at the beginning of the season. Goal number 2, every player wants to play again next season. Does every player want to play again next season? Or you could say, does every player sign up and play again next season? Goal number 2, every player wants to play baseball again next year. Number 3, no unnecessary injuries. Were we able to avoid unnecessary injuries? A kid getting hit with a baseball bat by an errant, misplaced swing in an area that should have been a no swing, no bat zone. Was a player placed behind the receiving player on a throwing drill? Notice how I didn't say no injuries, no unnecessary injuries. If a ball bounces up, hits a kid in the tooth falls out, hey, not much you can do about that. Bad bounces, kids running into each other accidentally, injuries are going to happen. But as coaches, did we eliminate all unnecessary injuries? Things that could have been avoided proactively. All right, so I think those 3 goals really can get you going. I think it really keeps it focused. There's some nuances. The first one is not just necessarily one goal, but it could be 3 to 4 goals. I would say at least 2 goals, 2 skills that each player is trying to improve from the start of the season to the end of the season. I would say for the young kids, 6 years old, 7 years old, 2 skills. Are they throwing more accurately, and are they making better contact? Those would be 2 good ones to start with. When pitchers start pitching, where the pitcher's throwing a higher percentage of strikes at the end of the season, so did every player improve from the start of the season to the end of the season? Goal number 1. And I think it's important to pick specific skills, so it keeps us focused on those. And again, pick the big needle movers. Use the 80-20 principle to pick those skills that we want to improve. Goal number 2, does every player want to come back and play again next season? Number 3, did we avoid all unnecessary injuries? All right. I think it's important to have these goals as, like I mentioned, the word compass, because it keeps us focused on the prize, what's important, the goal. It keeps us focused on the priorities. And then from there, you can be creative. You can take those 3 goals and be really creative within those. They're malleable. You can fit them to your team. It keeps our coaching focus steady, because things can start to waver as the season moves along. We can start to get off track and we get distracted. All right. We want these skills better. We want every player to enjoy the time out there so they come back next year. And I don't want any kid getting smoked by a ball when he shouldn't have been getting smoked by that ball or getting whacked by a bat because I didn't implement firm rules and expectations as to where kids could swing the bat, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Now I just finished up coaching, and I was the assistant on a 7 and 8-year-old soccer team for the YMCA. And when I went out the first practice, I kind of laid back because I thought, hey, Coach Scott wanted to do it. He'd coached many years before. He has 3 older kids. Then he asked me to help out be an assistant. So I jumped at the chance, of course. Not going to turn down a coaching opportunity. So I jumped at the opportunity and I helped Coach Scott out. I was a little hesitant because I have come across a lot of youth coaches over the years that I just don't align with in terms of why I think they're out there for the wrong reasons. They're driven by their ego. They're driven by things that I think are not good, that I don't agree with, and I don't think are good for the players, the game, the teams, and it makes for a really bad environment. And so I didn't know how the season was going to go. I didn't know how Coach Scott coached, but oh my gosh, talk about impressed. I couldn't have been more impressed. That's how good it was. And here I am. I talk coaching, I'm studying, I'm watching, I'm learning, I'm sharing, I'm interviewing coaches. I've had a coaching podcast out 4.5 years. I've been coaching for a lot of years. And so I get out there every single practice, every single game, just thoroughly impressed with how Coach Scott handled the team, handled the environment. And here we go. Number 1, Coach Scott praised the players early and often, but also during the games, Coach Scott praised the other team and gave specific praise like, hey, great dribbling, number 5, when number 5 on the other team was dribbling the ball down the sideline in front of us really well. Or if a kid kicked the ball with their left foot when they're right-footed, so they kicked it with their off foot and scored a goal. Coach, a great way to use your left foot, number 10. Now, of course, Coach Scott praised our team a lot more than the other team, but I thought it was really a good example to set. By praising the other team, I thought that set a good example. It wasn't us versus them. We were all out there with the same purpose, to enjoy ourselves, to get exercise, to play a team sport, to improve our soccer skills, and to get away from that screen time, right? Among other things. Coach Scott also never raised his voice to the refs. And there was 3 or 4 times the refs, they were dropping the ball. Now, I come in knowing the refs probably aren't going to be that great. I think if you go in with the expectation that the refs aren't going to be that great, then you're never let down. You just go and go, nah, they're not going to be good. And they weren't. I'm not expecting FIFA referees. I'm not expecting MLS or World Cup referees. So when the refs botched some things, messed up some stuff, Coach Scott never raised his voice to the refs. And in fact, at the end of every game, he had our players go shake the referee's hands. And none of the other teams did that. And I thought that was a really nice gesture. Number 3, Scott had a really great skill progression that he added to each week, a focus of the week. For example, dribbling, reversing the ball, passing, shooting, throw-ins, to name a few. He had a great skill progression that we added to each week, and it was really great that there was a focus of the week. And it was a very clear focus. It was clarified. It was very clear, like, this is what we're focusing on this practice. Number 4, Coach Scott learned the names of the players within the first few practices. He might have known them all by the end of the first practice, but he definitely knew them by the end of the second practice. Coach Scott knew every player without no name tag on, no jersey number on, just he knew all the players' names, and he was using their names early and often. Number 5, Coach Scott listened to the assistant, which was me. So when I threw in some input, a suggestion, a tip here or there, he rolled with it. He didn't question. He said, let's do it. Boom. Okay, let's go. Let's do that. So he listened to the assistant coach, and he allowed the assistant coach to have some input and say on the practice setup, practice plan, drill design. Number 6, he sent out a great email and text every week, highlighting the skill focus of the week. Of course, he sends this to the parents. He sent an email, a text every week, highlighting the skill focus of the week, the quick why behind it. It was really great. This is what we're focusing on here. This is the skill this week. So when we get to the game, this is what we're really going to work on. And this is the why behind it. And I thought that was really good. So at the game, when we were coaching up a certain skill, the parents knew that we might not address everything as to avoid confusing the players and putting too much on their plate and too many things to work on at one time. And I thought that was really great. The communication, an email, a text. You get out your phone, you get a notes app, and you just start talking into it. You dictate out the email, you run it through a spell check, and you send it off. I found a really cool app. I have an iPhone. I found a really cool app called Just Press Record. It's essentially the voice memo app that comes default on iPhones, on Androids, a voice memo app, native app that comes pre-installed. I got this one. It was like $4, one-time purchase. And I set up a shortcut on my phone. I also have an Apple Watch that has a complication on it, for those of you that know what those are. And I just, boom, I can click one button from my home screen on my watch and start talking. Well, here's the good thing. It syncs with my computer. It syncs obviously with my phone, and then it transcribes the note. Again, you don't need that setup, but it was literally, I can just take my watch right now. I'm looking at it. I press the button and it starts recording, and then it transcribes it. Is accuracy perfect? No. But you run it through a quick spell check, proofread it, and boom, bullet point where you think bullet points need to be, etc. And then boom, there you go. Send out that email. And that communication really helped all the parents stay on the same page as the coaches and the players. And he also recommended they cheer when they did those things correctly and not overcoach other things that weren't the main course of the week. Number 7, Coach Scott had them share out something that their teammates did well. This happened at a couple practices and after a couple of games. He told the players, hey, at the end of practice, I'm going to go around the circle and each of you is going to share something that one of your teammates did really well, something that you saw them do really well. And he asked them to be specific. And I thought that was awesome because then it gets players looking out and it's not all about them, and also seeing the good in their teammates, looking for the good around them. I think that was a small thing, but a nice touch. He didn't do it at every practice or at every game, but at 2 of the practices and at 2 of the games, at the beginning of the practice, he said, hey, at the end of practice, each one of you will share out at least one thing you saw one of your teammates do awesome. And one way he did it was he paired up the players. And so every player got to hear praise from one of their teammates. If you don't pair them up, right, you might have 7 of the players say some praise to one of the players. So it all goes to one because that was just standout play or standout thing at practice. So I really liked how he paired them up. So they knew they had to look for that player, and it also distributed out the praise across the entire team. Makes it a little harder for the player looking to give praise, but I liked it. It was a nice touch. And number 8, he had a nice, simple, clear rule that helped the culture, the team culture. There's always more than one part to building a good team culture, but there was one simple rule that I think really, talk about the 80-20, this thing might be the one rule that takes care of 80% of the things that could dissolve a team culture with regard to the dynamic amongst the players. His rule was only say nice things. We only say nice things. 4 words, only say nice things. 4 words, very clear message. And I thought, wow, that's really great because if players can only say nice things, that covers a lot of bases and is hugely impactful on the team culture. So those are 8 things that Coach Scott did really well. I hope you can take some of those and use those out there with your team, your players. And in fact, at the end of the season after our last game, I heard a couple different parents. As soon as the game was over, I heard them go up to Coach Scott and say, hey, Coach, please let us know if you're coaching next year, because if you are, we definitely want to be on your team. And last week I shared how another coach, an opposing coach, came over to Coach Scott and said how much they enjoyed coaching against him because of how positive he is, and that the experience of coaching against him was a lot better than coaching against many of the other coaches. Coach Scott is not a full-time coach. He's got a full-time job. He runs a pretty big organization for his day job. So he's got a lot on his plate. And I think a lot of it just has to do with some prep work, some planning, having some goals. So pretty cool all around. And I wanted to share that with all of you. So a couple weeks ago, I was over near Seattle in Kent, Washington, and I went on a tour of Driveline Baseball. And if you're not familiar with Driveline, they've been around for, I don't know, maybe 12 years, but they've really been big for the last 5 or 6 years. And they do a lot of stuff with pros, college, high school. The facility was really great, but what I took out of it was how they try to measure things, and they try to gamify a lot of things, not just when they test strength and speed and quickness and that sort of thing. But they try to quantify as much stuff as they can. They try to gamify as much stuff as they can. And as coaches, even though we don't have that technology that they might have in their facility, which was this massive building, and there's so many different things going on. As a coach, what are some things we can do to gamify our practices, gamify a drill? What are some things we can do to quantify? I gave you that throwing test drill. That was a simple way to quantify throwing accuracy, comparing the beginning of the season to the end of the season, but getting some data points. Kids like that. And it makes me think of one of my high school football coaches, Coach Pendleton. Coach Pendleton was one of the most well-respected track and field. He coached throwers at the high school level, had a national champ. He had state champions. He was one of the most respected in the whole country with throwing discus and shot put, but he was also a defensive coordinator and actually head coach, offensive coordinator for years. I want to say he coached at the high school I went to for close to 45 years. He taught and coached. That's pretty impressive. But I just remember something that he did that really motivated players. He would put their bench press numbers once they got above 200-pound bench press. He would put their name up on the board, and he would have the 200, 210, 220, 230, all the way up to whatever number it went to. And I'll tell you what, seeing your name up there motivated you a little bit more. I swear I got about 25% more out of my bench press ability because my name was up there, and I like seeing it move up that board. He did the same thing for squat, clean and jerk, snatch, things like that. So how can we gamify things? How can we quantify things? Stopwatch is a great starting point. And that's really what a lot of what Driveline's doing. They're trying to quantify everything. And how can we quantify some things to give our kids numbers to shoot for, things to kind of motivate them? Players like numbers. They like that. They like targets. They like goals. My daughter came home every other day for the last month talking about the countdown that their class had to get to 20 points. They had to behave. They had to be orderly to a certain point or for a certain period of time or for certain things. And they had to do that. And they got a point every day that they did whatever it was with regard to being well behaved, not acting a fool. And the teacher kept a tally up on the board for the kids to see. Gamified having better behavior. And when they got to 20, they got to watch some kids movie and have some popcorn and bring their blankets and stuffies in. What can we do as coaches to quantify, to gamify our practices, our training, our season? So that's really the big thing I took out of Driveline. They got a lot of stuff going on over there. Pretty impressive. It's definitely catering toward the more advanced players. There was tons of pictures of professional players on the wall, Polaroids up on this wall inside, Mookie Betts and others. Now, when I go into something like that, I always say, okay, I try not to get distracted by the shiny objects. What I try to say is, how can we take what they're doing and boil it down to something that can help elevate our youth coaching game? So that's why I shared that message with you right there. With that, we're going to wrap it up. Next week, I have a hitting tip that can help get players ready for the next level. That'll come next Tuesday when we get together for our next visit. Also, it would be great if you could share this with a friend, share the podcast with a family member, a friend, another coach that you know. That would be much appreciated. And go visit 8020baseball.com. There's a dozen articles over there, 14 videos. Everything's been updated over the past few months. Get your free drill design guide. You can email me on the contact page there. You can see my bio on there, all that jazz. So go ahead over there and check that out. Until next week, let's all take care of our health so we can be there for our families, our close friends, and so we can be the best coach, the best parent that we can be. All right, everyone, you take care. Until next week, adios.
This has been the 80-20 Baseball Masterclass. Take it to the field.